And do you, Daisy, take Victor to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward?" "No," I said out loud for everyone to hear clearly. "I don't." The sound that went through the congregation was like a wave hitting a wall. A collective gasp, heads turning. Someone dropped something in the back row that immediately shattered. Victor's face went from confusion to more confusion. But before he could say anything, I turned to face the crowd. "I'm ending this engagement," I said clearly. "Victor has been unfaithful for the duration of our engagement. I have evidence. I won't spend my life with a man who looked at me and decided I wasn't enough. And I'm still getting married today, just not to him." The doors at the back of the venue opened. So Yi Jung walked in. Every eye in the building tracked him. The guests who recognized him, and many did, went very still. The most dangerous man in Seoul. They probably wondered what he was doing here. He didn't look at them. He looked only at me. And something in my heart beat increased, my eyes never leaving his. Before we begin the story from where it all started from, please subscribe if you're new here. Hit that like button and drop a comment because this story. You don't want to miss a single part. I followed him on a Tuesday night. That was my first mistake, or maybe it was the smartest thing I ever did. Depends on which version of my life you're measuring from. Victor had told me he was meeting a client. Late dinner, he said. Important people. He kissed my cheek the way he always did, warm, practiced, easy, and walked out the door of our shared apartment looking like the man I had agreed to spend the rest of my life with. I stood at the window and watched his car pull out of the driveway. Then I grabbed my coat and followed him. I'd been ignoring the signs for weeks. The late nights that smelled like something floral and foreign. The way his phone screen would tilt just slightly away from me whenever a message came in. The distracted quality in his eyes when I talked about our wedding plans, like I was describing someone else's future, and he was too polite to say so. But I'm not a woman who acts on suspicion. I needed to be sure. So I followed him, all the way across the city, through streets lit in neon, past restaurants and convenience stores and couples walking in the cold, until his car finally stopped outside a hotel. The kind with a lobby that doesn't ask questions and elevators that never remember faces. And I watched Victor walk inside with a woman. She was Korean, beautiful in the effortless way some women are, like she hadn't tried at all, and the world had simply arranged itself around her face. She laughed at something Victor said and touched his arm, and he looked at her the way he used to look at me. Easy, warm, like she was his. I stood on the pavement for a long time after they disappeared through the glass doors. I didn't cry, I'm not sure why. Maybe I had been grieving this quietly for weeks without nomming it. Maybe something in me had already known. Either way, I stood there in the cold Seoul night, a black woman in a city that was never quite sure what to do with me, staring at a hotel that had just swallowed my fiancé whole, and I felt something shift inside me. Not heartbreak. Not yet. Something colder. Something that would take a while to name. I went home, and I started planning. Her name was Hera. I found that out over the following week. I was resourceful, had always been, even before Victor, even before this country. My father's business struggles had taught me early that no one solves your problems for you. You study. You adapt. You move quietly. So I studied Hera. I learned her coffee shop, her lunch spots, her favorite afternoon walk through Bukshan Hanok village. And then one afternoon, I engineered a collision, quite literally walked into her outside a cafe, sent her bag skidding across the pavement, crouched to help her collect it, and smiled. "I'm so sorry," I said in Korean, which always surprised people. I wasn't watching where I was going. She looked up, and something in her face softened the way people's faces sometimes do when they decide you're harmless. "It's okay," she said. "Really." We ended up having coffee together. It was that easy. Hera was not what I expected. She was kind in a quiet, fractured sort of way, like a woman carrying something heavy that she had long stopped talking about. She asked me questions, genuinely interested, and I told her the true parts of my story. That I was foreign, that I was engaged, that I was lonely in ways I hadn't fully admitted to myself yet. She nodded like she understood. We became friends over the next 2 weeks. Real ones, or the closest thing to real under the circumstances. And then she told me she was pregnant. I watched her face when she said it, that complicated mixture of joy and terror, and I already knew. I already knew whose child it was. But I kept my expression warm and open and said congratulations, and I held her hand across the cafe table, and I did not say a single word about the man we both loved. Because I needed information, more than I needed relief. She told me everything, about a relationship that had started 3 months ago, about a man who made her feel seen after years of a marriage that had made her feel invisible. She didn't mention Victor's name, called him only someone special with the specific carefulness of a woman protecting a secret. But she told me the shape of it, the texture, the hotel on Tuesday nights, the way he looked at her. I listened, I nodded, and in my chest behind my ribs, something burned very quietly. Then she said something that changed the trajectory of everything. "My husband doesn't know," she said softly, "and I don't know how I'm going to tell him. He's not an easy man." I looked at her. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, and in the pause, her eyes did something complicated. "He's powerful, in ways that are difficult to explain. He's not cruel to me, he never has been, but his world is." She shook her head. "We were only married because I was pregnant, and then I lost the baby, and we've been here ever since. 2 strangers sharing a house." "Who is he?" I asked, keeping my voice gentle. She looked at the table. "So Yi Jung." I didn't react, not visibly, but the name moved through me like electricity because I had done my research and I knew exactly who So Yi Jung was. Everyone in Seoul knew, even if they pretended otherwise. The kind of name you said in quiet rooms. The kind of man whose business interests extended into places that didn't appear on any official register. The most dangerous man in the city. And he was married to the woman, sleeping with my fiance. I sat with that for exactly 4 seconds. Then something cold and brilliant settled over me, and I thought, this is it. This is the shape of the plan. I sent the message anonymously. A simple text to a number I had obtained through channels I am not proud of, but which had involved 3 days of careful social engineering and one very chatty junior associate at a firm I will never name. "Your wife is pregnant, but the child is not yours. I have evidence. Meet me if you want to know more." Then a restaurant address, a time, nothing else. I spent 4 hours getting ready. I'm not a vain woman, I don't have the luxury, and I've never needed it, but I understand the power of appearance. I understand what it means to walk into a room and own it before you've said a single word. So I took my time. I chose a dress that was the color of midnight, simple in its cut but exact in the way it moved. I did my makeup with patience and intention, a red lip, edges clean enough to draw blood. I pressed my hair back. I looked in the mirror for a long moment. Then I thought about Victor texting Hera while I planned our honeymoon, and I picked up my bag and walked out the door. The restaurant was warm and golden lit, and completely empty. That stopped me at the entrance. I turned to the server near the host stand. "Where is everyone?" "Your partner booked the entire restaurant," he said carefully, "for privacy." I absorbed that. Booked the entire restaurant. Of course he had. I told myself it made sense. A man like So Yi Jung did not have conversations in public rooms where ears could wander. I straightened my shoulders and walked to the table I had reserved, and I sat down. And I waited. He didn't make me wait long. That surprised me. The door opened, and So Yi Jung walked in. I had seen photographs. They did not prepare me. He was tall in the way that fills a room, not just height but presence, the specific weight of a man who has never once in his life had to announce himself. He wore dark clothing, simple and precise, and he moved with the unhurried certainty of someone who has never needed to rush because the world has always waited for him. His face was, I make no apologies for this, devastating. Sharp jaw, strong features, eyes that were almost black and absolutely unreadable as they swept the empty restaurant and then found me and stayed. The moment his gaze landed on mine, something happened to the air between us. I felt it, and I am not a dramatic woman. I don't believe in things I cannot see, but I felt it, like a pressure shift, like the room had decided to lean slightly in our direction. He crossed the floor and sat across from me without invitation. He looked at me the way someone examines a piece of evidence, thorough, unhurried, giving nothing. Then he spoke. The evidence. His voice was low and precise, the English clear but shaped around his first language. Where is it? Because I want you to understand something first. If you brought me here for nothing, you will regret it. This room is booked. My men are outside. He tilted his head slightly. You understand what I'm saying. I glanced past him. Through the glass front, I could see two men standing near black cars, and one of them had his jacket open just enough for me to understand what was underneath it. I looked back at So Yi Jung. I understand, I said. He waited. I was not scared. I want to be honest about this because it is important. I was not scared, and it wasn't bravado or performance. Sitting across from the most dangerous man in Seoul with armed escorts outside and the entire city between me and anyone who knew where I was, I felt calm. I think some part of me had passed through fear already, somewhere between standing on a pavement watching Victor disappear into a hotel and deciding to reach out to a mafia boss. Fear requires a future you're still attached to. I wasn't sure I had one of those anymore. I reached into my bag and slid a folder across the table. He opened it. His face didn't change. That was, I thought, the most frightening thing about him, not the guns outside, not his reputation, but the absolute stillness of his expression as he turned through photographs of his wife and my fiancé. 3 months of moments captured by my hired photographer. Hotel lobbies, restaurant corners, a park bench. Hera laughing. Victor's hand at her waist. He closed the folder, set it on the table between us. His thumb traced the edge of it, one small, contained motion. This proves infidelity, he said. Not that the child is not mine. I know, I said. I don't have medical evidence for the pregnancy. I wasn't able to record her when she told me. Something shifted in his gaze. She told you. She's become my friend. She doesn't know who I am to Victor. He looked at me for a long moment. Searching, I realized, looking for the place where my calm broke. He was a man who read people for survival, and he was trying to read me. I told you, he said slowly, that if your evidence was insufficient, I would deal with you. You don't look afraid. I'm not. Why not? Because, I said, keeping my voice even and my eyes on his, if you killed me for bringing you genuine evidence of your wife's affair, simply because I couldn't also produce a paternity test, that would be a foolish move. And I don't think you're foolish, Yi Jung. The silence stretched between us. And then So Yi Jung laughed. It was brief, a single exhale of genuine surprise, the sound of a man encountering something he hadn't calculated for. It changed his face completely, just for that 1 second, like light moving under ice. You're interesting, he said. Thank you. That wasn't a compliment, it was an observation. But something in his eyes said otherwise. He leaned back, studying me with a new quality of attention, the way you look at something that has rearranged your expectations. So then, what do you want? Because I could simply deal with Hera. That is the obvious solution. I need more than that, I said. I need you. He raised an eyebrow. My fiancé, Victor, needs to lose everything. His reputation, his business connections, his standing. I can't simply break the engagement and walk away. My family's business depends on this marriage. My father doesn't know Victor is cheating. He arranged this. I paused. I need a partner for what I'm planning. And you need someone who can get close enough to Hera to confirm the child's paternity and get her to confess. I've been living this quietly for weeks. I'm not walking away with nothing. Yi Jung looked at me for a long moment. You want to get engaged? Yes. I'm married. I know. You'll need to divorce her first, after she confesses. And what, he said very carefully, do you get out of marrying me beyond revenge on your fiancé? I decided honesty was the only currency worth spending here. A wealthy match. My father's business is failing. That's partly why this arranged marriage to Victor happened in the first place. If I break this off without a replacement, my family pays the consequences. I need a husband. I glanced at him briefly, and despite everything, my composure slipped exactly 1 millimeter. You're perfectly suited. He said nothing. He was watching me with that dark, measuring gaze, and I held it because I refused to look away. "The wedding," he said finally. "Tell me the plan." I walk to the altar. At the moment of vows, I say no. You make your entrance. We announce our engagement publicly. It's a humiliation Victor cannot recover from, not in front of his entire network, his family, the people whose respect he uses to protect his business interests. "And Hera," he said, "she'll be there. I'll make sure of it." Young leaned forward slowly, and the table was not large. The distance between his face and mine collapsed to something that made my next breath considerably more difficult than the one before it. He had eyes that you could study for a long time without solving, and up close, the line of his jaw was. I kept my expression neutral and my breathing measured, and I refused to be a woman who falls apart over cheekbones. "You should think very carefully," he said quietly. "My world is not something you survive by accident. It requires intention. There are people who want me dead. You saw that in a photograph tonight. When you stand next to me, you inherit that." "I'm aware." "Are you? You had your men standing with guns outside a restaurant, and I came anyway." I met his eyes. "I think I've demonstrated my awareness." Something moved in his gaze, not warmth exactly, recognition, like I had said a password he hadn't known he was waiting for. He held out his hand. I shook it. His grip was firm and warm, and he held my hand 1 second longer than a handshake required, and I felt that 1 second in my sternum. He released my hand and stood. "I'll be in touch," he said. "Wait." I reached into my bag and pulled out a business card, plain, just my number. "For contact." He took it, looked at it, slipped it into his jacket without another word, and walked out of the empty restaurant with the particular grace of a man who is used to making exits. I sat alone in the golden light for a moment. My heart was doing something embarrassing against my ribs. He is a means to an end, I told myself firmly. That's all. Victor lied about working late. He came home at 11, smelling like he had recently showered in someone else's bathroom, and kissed my cheek and said he was exhausted and went to bed. I lay beside him in the dark and stared at the ceiling. At midnight, my phone lit up with a single text. "A Raven." I stared at the screen. Took me a minute to realize it was Yi Jung. I typed back, "What does that mean?" "That's your name. Raven. You came into a room full of guns and didn't flinch. Bold. Cold. The Raven doesn't scare, it watches." I read it twice. Something in my chest did a complicated thing. I typed, "Hera doesn't seem like a Raven at all." A pause, longer than I expected. "No, she was never my type. We're only together because of a pregnancy, one she lost afterward. I stayed because leaving felt like losing, and I don't lose." Then, after another pause, "It wasn't real. None of it was, but I ended up loving her and wanting to make it real." I held my phone in the dark bedroom where my lying fiance breathed steadily beside me, and I felt something unexpected. A specific kind of sorrow on behalf of a dangerous man I had known for 3 hours. "I'm sorry," I typed. "You deserved better than that." The phone was quiet for so long I thought the conversation was over. Then, "Thanks." One word, but something about its plainness felt more honest than anything Victor had said to me in months. I put my phone down and stared at the ceiling and told myself, very firmly, to go to sleep. We texted every day after that. I don't know exactly when it became normal, somewhere between the second week and the third. It simply was. Yi Jung texted like someone who chose his words the way he probably chose everything, deliberately with no wasted motion. He wasn't chatty, but he responded, quickly, always. I found myself reaching for my phone in the mornings before I'd fully processed being awake, and there was always something from him. A news article about something we'd discussed the night before, or a single question that assumed the conversation had never stopped. "Have you eaten?" "Not yet." "Eat." I smiled at my phone in my kitchen, while Victor, 2 rooms away, got ready for a day that probably ended in a hotel. One evening, I was staring at my laptop, trying to make a decision about my wedding makeup. a sentence that contained too many contradictions to sit comfortably in. And without thinking, I took a photo of 2 lipstick options and sent it to Yi Jung. "Which one?" I typed under the photos. I didn't explain why. I figured he'd either answer or he wouldn't. He answered in under a minute. "Left, the other one is too soft, you're not that woman." I laughed out loud. Alone in my apartment, I laughed at my phone like an idiot. "How do you know what kind of woman I am?" "I watched you face down armed guards without blinking." "I know," he typed back immediately. I sat with that for a moment, then typed, "The left one it is." "Good. Also, stop texting me when you should be sleeping." You responded immediately. "That's different." "How?" He didn't answer that one. But I lay in the dark smiling like someone who had entirely forgotten the circumstances that had started this. 2 days before the wedding, Victor announced he had a bachelor's party and would be spending the night with friends. I nodded and said, of course. I made tea. I waited for the sound of his car leaving. Then I got dressed and went to meet Yi Jung. He had chosen a bar, small, private, the kind of place where the lighting is designed to make everyone's face unreadable. "Low profile," he had texted. "For now." I arrived and he was already there. Standing near the back table rather than sitting, jacket off, one hand in his pocket, looking at his phone with the total relaxed authority of a man who had never once in his life felt like he didn't belong somewhere. I stopped moving for 1 full second. I'd seen him across a restaurant table. I'd spent weeks texting him in the dark. But standing 10 feet away from him in a place this small, in lighting this close, he was *A lot. The way his face looked in low light, the specific geometry of him, I made myself move again. He looked up when I was halfway across the room, and his eyes found me, and they stayed. Something crossed his expression, brief, controlled, but there. The same thing I was trying not to show on my own face. "You're late," he said. "I'm exactly on time," I said. "Sit down." The corner of his mouth moved. We sat across from each other, and a waiter materialized to bring Yi Jung a drink. We went over the plan, the wedding layout, the seating, who would be where, the timing of his entrance, the divorce papers he had already had his lawyers prepare. He had been efficient, ruthless in the administrative sense. "Hera will be at the wedding," I confirmed. "I invited her personally. She thinks she's coming to support me." "Of course she does," he said. "Are you okay?" I asked. "With all of it?" He looked at me. "Are you asking if I'm emotionally prepared?" "I'm asking if you are." He was quiet for a moment. "It stopped being a real marriage a long time ago," he said. "But yes, there's something about it that I haven't." He stopped. Started again. "I thought the child was mine. I was." Another pause. "I was ready to be a father." I looked at him across the table and felt the weight of that. The specific grief of something you'd prepared yourself for that turned out to have never existed. "I know," I said quietly. His jaw tightened slightly. "Don't look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like you feel sorry for me." "I feel sorry for what was done to you. That's different." He looked at me for a moment. The table between us felt very small. "You are very strange," he said. "Because I'm being honest with you. Because you are the only person in years who has said something to me without calculating the angle first." I held his gaze. The air between us was doing something I was trying not to acknowledge. "I have plenty of angles," I said. "I know, but they don't cancel out the honesty." His eyes moved over my face in that thorough, unhurried way that made my temperature do something irresponsible. "You should be careful with that. In my world, honesty is an asset people will try to take from you." "Let them try." He almost smiled. "That's why you're my raven." And then the waiter arrived at our table, and I saw it, the way the man's wrist moved over Yi Jung's glass before he set it down. A small motion, the kind designed to look like nothing. My body reacted before my mind finished processing. I stood up so fast the chair scraped backward, crossed the 2 feet between us, and knocked the tray from the waiter's hands before Yi Jung could reach for the glass. The crash was enormous in the quiet bar. The tray hit the floor. Glass scattered like small explosions across the hardwood, and the bar, which had been murmuring quietly around us, went completely silent. Yi Jung was on his feet before the sound had finished echoing. "The waiter," I said, my voice steady even though my pulse was doing something violent. "He put something in your drink. I watched him do it." Yi Jung didn't ask if I was sure. He didn't waste a single second on doubt. His eyes found the waiter, who had already started moving toward the back, and something in Yi Jung's face shifted into something I had no word for. Not anger. Colder than anger. More final. "Get behind me," he said. "Yi Jung." "Now." I moved, not because I was scared. I want to be clear about that, but because I understood in that moment that this was his language. Control in chaos. And arguing with him mid-assassination attempt felt like bad timing. He pulled a gun from somewhere inside his jacket, with the ease of a man reaching for his phone. And then the back of the bar opened, and 3 men came through with weapons already raised, and everything happened very fast. I pressed myself against the wall, not hiding, watching. Yi Jung moved through that space like something terrifying and precise, and I understood then why people said his name in quiet rooms. He was not reckless. He was exact. Each shot placed with the kind of cold deliberateness that comes from a man who has never once panicked in his life. It was over in under a minute. The bar was wrecked and silent. 2 men down. 1 had fled. The waiter was pinned by Yi Jung's arm against the far wall, saying something fast and frightened in Korean. Yi Jung listened, said 1 quiet word, and let him go, and the man ran like his life depended on it, which it probably did. Yi Jung turned back to me. He was covered in blood. Not all of it his, but some of it was a gash along his left forearm from where something had caught him, already darkening his sleeve. His breathing was controlled. His eyes found me across the wreckage and moved over me quickly, checking, and something flickered in his expression when he confirmed I was whole. "Come," he said. "You're hurt. Come, Daisy." He said my name, my actual name. He had never said it before, only Raven, and the way it came out, low and direct and carrying something underneath it that he hadn't meant to let through, made me move toward him without another word. He put his body between me and the door as we left. His hand touched my back to guide me through the ruined space, and even in the middle of all of it, the glass underfoot, the smell of gunpowder, the absolute wreckage of the last 60 seconds, I was aware of that hand. The warmth of it, the steadiness. His car was outside, engine already running. He put me in the passenger seat and got in himself, and we were moving before my door had fully closed. He took me to his house. It was not what I expected, though I'm not sure what I had expected. Something colder, maybe, more fortress than home. But it was a real house, spacious and clean, with high windows and careful lighting and the particular quality of quiet that comes from very good construction. The kind of place that keeps the world outside. He led me through the front door with his hand still at my back. "Don't open your eyes," he said. "What?" He paused. "I need to handle something, don't look." "Yi Jung." I turned to face him and his expression was guarded, almost careful in a way I hadn't seen before. This man who had just shot his way out of an assassination without changing his breathing was standing in his own hallway looking at me like I was a problem he didn't know how to solve. "I'm looking," I said. "I'm looking right now. You're covered in blood and you're hurt and I'm not closing my eyes." Something moved across his face. "This doesn't frighten you," he said. It wasn't quite a question. "No." "It should." "Maybe," I looked at him steadily. "You're still a good person." He laughed, brief, disbelieving, the sound of a man hearing something in a foreign language he recognizes but doesn't expect. "You know very little about me. I know you believed a child was yours and were ready to be its father. I know you've texted me back immediately for 3 weeks. I know you built the plan around making sure I got what I needed too." I held his gaze. "I know enough." The hallway was very quiet. Yi Jung looked at me the way he had looked at the photographs on that first night, thorough and unhurried, except that this time, what moved through his expression was not calculation. It was something rower than that, something he was visibly trying to contain. And then he crossed the distance between us and kissed me. It was not gentle. It was not tentative. It was the kiss of a man who had been holding something back for 3 weeks of midnight texts and careful distance, and had run out of reasons to keep holding it. His hand came up to my jaw, and I kissed him back with 3 weeks of the same, because I had been pretending, too. I had been very carefully pretending for a very long time, and I was tired of it. We stayed like that for a long moment, longer than I meant to. And then he stopped. He pulled back just enough and pressed his forehead against mine. His breathing had finally, for the first time all evening, stopped being controlled. "I can't," he said. "Yi Jung, I can't love you." His voice was low and fractured at the edges in a way I had not heard before. "After this is finished, after the wedding, after everything is done, we divorce. That was the plan. That is still the plan." His thumb moved along my jaw, one small contradiction to his own words. "My world will try to hurt you. It already tried tonight. You were in a room with me for 2 hours and you almost got poisoned. This is what my life is, Daisy. Every day. I don't want that for you." I looked at him. At this man who had walked into a restaurant to meet a stranger and stayed to build something he hadn't planned for. Who texted me at midnight about lipstick shades and raven birds and single word, replies that somehow said more than anything Victor had ever said with full sentences. "I love you," I said. He closed his eyes. "I know it's fast," I said. "I know what your world looks like. I saw it tonight, I watched it tonight, I didn't hide from it. And I'm telling you that I don't care. Not because I'm reckless, because you are worth it." I put my hand against his chest, where I could feel his heartbeat, faster than his face would ever admit to. "The only question is whether you're going to spend the rest of your life protecting me from a feeling that's already here, or whether you're going to let it be here." The silence went on long enough that I thought I had lost. And then his hand covered mine against his chest, pressing it there, holding it over his heartbeat. "You are impossible," he said quietly. "You keep saying things like that, and then texting me back immediately. It's a contradiction." He made a sound that was almost a laugh, and then he kissed me again, slower this time, deliberate in a different way. The way of a man making a decision rather than surrendering to one. I decided that was enough. For tonight, that was enough. The wedding morning arrived the way bad days always do, with perfect, indifferent weather. I stood in front of the mirror in the bridal suite and looked at myself for a long moment. White dress, immaculate. The left lipstick, exactly as instructed. I looked like exactly what I was supposed to look like, a bride. My phone buzzed. "How do you feel?" Yi Jung asked. I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was not the same woman who had stood on a pavement 3 weeks ago watching her fiancé disappear into a hotel. That woman had been breaking. This one had been rebuilt around something harder and truer. "Ready," I typed. His reply came in seconds. "Good, I'll be there." Just that, but the way he sent it, like a steadying hand, like he knew exactly what I needed across the distance between us, made my eyes sting for exactly 3 seconds. Then I blinked it away, lifted my chin, and walked out of the suite. The venue was a grand thing. Victor's family had money and they liked everyone to know it. White flowers climbing every surface, guests in their finest, string quartet doing its job in the corner. I walked down a hall toward the main doors, and through the gap in them I could see Victor at the altar, looking handsome and composed, and I felt nothing. Not even rage. Just the clean, bright clarity of someone who knows exactly what they're doing. I searched the crowd through the gap in the doors as my bridesmaids arranged themselves. 3rd row on the left, Hera. She was dressed beautifully, a soft green dress, and she met my eyes across the space and smiled warmly, the smile of a friend. I smiled back. Perfect, I thought. The doors opened. I walked. The music swelled and 200 people turned to look at me, and I walked the length of that aisle with my chin up and my shoulders back, and my heart beating the way it does when you're walking toward something rather than away from it. Victor watched me come with something in his eyes that might have been love once. I didn't know anymore. I didn't need to. I reached the altar. The officiant began. Words washed over me, unity, commitment, the rest of your lives, and I stood in my white dress looking at Victor and feeling the seconds tick down like something beautiful. Do you, Victor, the officiant said, take Daisy to be your lawfully wedded wife? Victor said, I do, with the full, practiced confidence of a man who has no idea what is about to happen to him. The officiant turned to me. And do you, Daisy, take Victor to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward? The room held its breath. I looked at Victor. I thought about Tuesday nights, about a hotel lobby, about a woman in a green dress who had become my friend while carrying my fiance's child, about weeks of careful silence while I built something out of the wreckage of what he had done to me. No, I said. The sound that went through the congregation was like a wave hitting a wall, a collective inhale, heads turning, someone dropping something in the back row. Victor's face did several things in rapid succession. I turned to face the crowd before he could speak. I'm ending this engagement, I said clearly, my voice carrying to every corner of the room without effort. Victor has been unfaithful for the duration of our engagement. I have evidence. I won't spend my life with a man who looked at me and decided I wasn't enough. I paused, letting the silence do its work. And I'm getting married today, just not to him. The doors at the back of the venue opened. So Yi Jung walked in. He was dressed in all black, of course he was, and he walked the length of that aisle with the particular unhurried authority of a man who has never entered a room second in his life. Every eye in the building tracked him. The guests who recognized him, and many did, went very still. He didn't look at them, he looked at me. His eyes found mine from the back of the room and held them all the way down the aisle, and I felt that gaze like a hand at my back, steady, certain, warm in a way his face rarely showed to the world, but which I had learned to read in 3 weeks of midnight conversations. He was walking toward me like I was the only fixed point in a moving room, and something in my chest did something enormous and quiet all at once. He reached the altar and stood beside me, and the room erupted, not loudly, but in the fractured, urgent way of people trying to figure out what they were witnessing. Victor found his voice. What is this? Who are? So Yi Jung, Yi Jung said simply without looking at him. I think you know that name. Victor went pale. And then someone else found their voice from the third row, left side. Hera stood up, her face confused and beginning to be frightened. Yi Jung, what are you doing here? What is? He turned to her then. His expression was not cruel. It was not even angry. It was something worse, entirely resolved. The face of a man who has already moved past the grief and into the action. Sit down, Hera, he said quietly. Yi Jung. He reached into his jacket and produced a document. Folded, clean, clearly prepared by people who were very good at their jobs. He set it on the altar with a calm that made it somehow more devastating than any raised voice would have been. Divorce papers, he said, filed as of this morning. The stated reason is that the child you're carrying belongs to another man. He paused. Victor's specifically. The silence in the room was the loudest thing I had ever heard. Hera looked at the papers, her face crumpled. That's not Yi Jung, you don't have proof of that. Tell me I'm wrong, he said. The congregation was completely motionless. 100 people holding their breath around a woman who was running out of exits. Tell me I'm wrong, Hera. His voice didn't rise. It never rose. It simply became more precise, more quiet, and somehow that was more devastating than volume. Tell me that child is mine. Look me in the eyes and tell me. Hera looked at him. Her eyes moved once, involuntarily, helplessly, to Victor. That single glance said everything. I'm sorry, she said, barely above a whisper. I'm sorry, it wasn't planned, it happened, and I didn't know how to, the pregnancy. I was going to tell you the truth later, that it isn't yours, I thought. She stopped. The words were coming apart under their own weight. I'm sorry. You're right, Victor is the father, but I'm truly sorry. The room detonated. Not physically, but in the way of a social explosion, 200 people processing the same truth at the same moment, voices beginning in clusters, heads turning between Victor and Hera and Yi Jung and me. Victor was saying something, denying it, probably. It didn't matter. And somewhere his mother had stood up, and somewhere else a photographer who clearly had no idea how to handle this was still shooting. Yi Jung's men entered from 3 different doors, quiet and efficient, and moved to the positions we had discussed. "Remove them," Yi Jung said simply, not loudly, but it was heard. Victor started to object. One of Yi Jung's men put a hand on his shoulder, and Victor, to his credit, was smart enough to understand what that meant. Hera was crying, her green dress catching the light, and I watched her go with something that surprised me, not triumph, not even satisfaction, just a tired, aching sadness for the version of her I had genuinely liked. She had been kind to me. She had been broken in her own way. I hoped the version of her life that came after this was kinder than the version that had led her here. Then the room was quieter, and it was just Yi Jung and me at the altar, and 200 guests who were possibly still processing whether they were at a wedding or a crime scene. The officiant looked between us, with the expression of a man being asked to navigate a situation his training had absolutely not covered. Yi Jung turned to me. Up close, his eyes were doing the thing they did, dark, layered, carrying more than his voice would ever say. He looked at me with the same quality of attention he had given me in an empty restaurant 3 weeks ago, except that now it was warmer. Now there was something in it that he had stopped hiding. "You said you needed a husband," he said quietly, for only me to hear. "I did," I said. "You said I was perfectly suited." "You are." The corner of his mouth moved. Then he held out his hand, not to shake this time, palm up, an offering. "Shall we?" I put my hand in his. He faced the bewildered officiant and said, with perfect calm, "We'd like to get married. I'd recommend starting from the beginning." The officiant, demonstrating what I can only describe as extraordinary professional resilience, cleared his throat and began. The vows were not the ones I had planned. They were not the ones I had prepared for this day, in this dress, in this room. But when Yi Jung looked at me and said the words, plainly, without performance, in the direct, honest way of a man who has stopped calculating, I believed every one of them. I believed them the way I believed his midnight texts and his single-word replies, and the way he had put his body between me and a doorway in a wrecked bar without thinking. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Yi Jung looked at me for 1 second with something in his eyes that was private and whole and entirely ours, and then he kissed me, and the room, which had been managing a restrained and confused murmur, went fully loud around us, and I didn't hear any of it. I heard my own heartbeat. I felt his hand at my face. I thought, 3 weeks ago I was standing on a pavement in the cold watching my life fall apart. I thought, this is what fell apart into. Outside the venue afterward, while his team managed the aftermath and guests filtered out in a state of collective bewilderment, Yi Jung found me standing near the window in an anteroom off the main hall. I had taken off my shoes. I was holding them by the heels, looking at the city through the glass. He came and stood beside me. For a while we didn't say anything. The city moved below us, indifferent and beautiful, and we stood in the quiet of a very loud day. "Your father," he said eventually, "the business. I'll call him tonight. My people will reach out this week. We'll stabilize it." I turned to look at him. He was looking at the city, his profile clean and sharp in the afternoon light, and there was something in his face I was still learning to read, something that had been locked up for a long time and was only just beginning to find the air. "Yi Jung." He looked at me. "Thank you," I said, "not for the business arrangement, not for the plan or the executed precision of the morning, for the texts, for the midnight conversations, for asterisk thanks, said once with a plainness that had broken something open in me, for being, underneath the guns and the reputation and the absolute control, something real." He held my gaze. "Don't thank me," he said quietly. "I got a wife out of it." "You got a raven." "Yes," something moved in his eyes. "That's considerably better." I laughed, really laughed, the kind that catches you off guard and doesn't apologize for itself. And he watched me do it with that expression he got sometimes, the one that said I was a thing he hadn't expected and had decided to keep. His hand found mine at my side, and his fingers closed around it, not a gesture for the room, no room to perform for any more. Just his hand, just mine. Outside the window, Seoul was turning golden in the late afternoon, and behind us a photographer was probably having the career day of his life, and somewhere Victor was being escorted to a conversation he would not enjoy, and somewhere Hera was facing a truth she had outrun for too long. And I was standing in a white dress, holding hands with the most dangerous man in the city, feeling something I had no plan for and wanted anyway. Some plans fall apart perfectly, asterisk I thought. Yi Jung squeezed my hand once. I squeezed back. If this story wrecked you in the best way, subscribe, hit that like button, and drop a comment below. Tell me which part got you more. Mine was the very first moment our lovebirds met. Now share this with someone who needs a good story today. And stay close, because our next story will come with more drama to keep you hooked. See you next time.